Yeah, man, I'll tell you what, that dang old internet, man, you just go on there and point and click it and talk about www. Call me, you got then.
For some reason or another, you sound a little taller on radio.
Well, for my money, he's got all the facial characteristics of a criminal.
Now, here's your host, that gravy-sopping, crappie-flopping, stump-jumping, Bible-thumping, gun-toting, mater-growing son of a gun, the backwoods Baptist himself, Pastor Harold Smith.
Welcome to the pastor's office at Dayspring Baptist Church in Royal, Arkansas. I'm excited about this. I'm excited about every one of these. I know I say that a lot, but I really am. It never gets old. I have the best job in the world. The Lord, in His kind providence, allows me to travel around and just talk to my friends on the internet for a month. And I'm coming to the end of the month. Today is August 29th, isn't it?
Yes, August 29th.
This probably won't go on YouTube until, or Spotify or iTunes or wherever you listen. This podcast won't be posted until probably the end of October, 1st of November. Because we're late in the month and I've been trickling them out 5 days apart. And sometimes I've recorded 2 or 3 in a day. And then, yeah, if I did that, they would just get buried and some would never get listened to. So we're spacing them 5 days apart. But I'm sitting across the table in the office of Mike Montgomery. How are you doing, Mike?
I'm doing better than I deserve.
Better than you deserve. Let's start the way I've started all these, or try to start all these, with how did we meet? Do you remember how we met, the first time we met?
I do.
All right. Why don't you share that?
First time we met was through a mutual friend, Alan Nelson. He invited me to the Preachers of Grace conference. And pretty sure it's the first place I met you, was at your own conference. Is that right?
I know we met at a conference at Alan's.
It might have been there,
church.
But it was through Alan Nelson. I couldn't remember if it was a conference at his church and we met.
You knew him before you knew me. I know that's a fact.
Yeah,
and I know that it might have been about the same time.
Yeah, as in 21, I was looking for some like-minded churches in the area and ran across Alan. Me and him met for lunch. And at that lunch, he mentioned me needing to come to the Preachers of Grace conference.
Yeah.
And he would get an invitation for me. I said, okay.
It's the conference that chooses you, you know. I mean, we didn't advertise. We never advertised that we were having a conference. We just relied on those that came to share it with others that would benefit from it. I do remember you coming that year.
Last year.
The last year. I'm under a lot of pressure to have another. And a
conference like no other.
Yeah. Well, you know what else I'm now under pressure? I'm now under pressure to have regional meetings. Because the guys in South Georgia and Northern Michigan, and they're all like, why don't we have one here so everybody can come out here, and I'll host one up here and we'll meet over there. And I'm like, yeah, we took the podcast on the road, so why not take Preachers of Grace on the road?
Sounds like a good idea.
Yeah. I do remember you and I sitting around a table with about 7 or 8 guys, and I didn't know anything about eschatology, so I started asking dumb questions, and man, did I get myself an education. And I remember you sitting there for most of that conversation, and it was me versus 6, and I didn't really know what they believed, so I was kind of shocked when I heard it, just because I'm an idiot and don't know any better. But I was like the lone defender of my position until the end. And then you spoke up because you hadn't really weighed in one way or the other. And I was like, well, where have you been, Mike? I've been over here fielding questions from 6 guys. And anyways, I had no idea what, I don't know anything about eschatology. I don't read enough books to know. But I just remember, like, I would ask a question, they would answer it, and I was like, you got to be kidding me. That's what they believe? That's an official position? That's how shocked I was, because I didn't know.
I was letting you take all the flag.
I took it. But it was fun. Once I learned what they believed, then I was like, oh, okay. Well, no wonder I don't believe that. And then I went and looked at the Bible and kind of compared positions and went, no, I'm still pretty comfortable where I am. No temptation of me leaving, but we've seen each other at a few meetings, and you graciously had me come to your church and preach a few, maybe it was last year, maybe. Yeah. I think it was about a year ago, I would guess. You had me come preach here.
Yeah, it was in the fall.
Yeah.
I want to say September.
Yeah. That sounds right. It was about a year ago. I came, it's the first time I'd ever been in your church, and sweet people. You have a very, very good church.
They're better than I deserve.
Yeah. It was, I remember us all, I remember the service very well, and the people were very receptive. And I think I preached the sermon, The Bible, a Book Like No Other, which I just gave you a book on that message.
I think so.
And I remember we pulled the chairs back, rolled the tables in, set up the fellowship hall right where the sanctuary once was.
That's right.
And
little church, we use our space well. It's
a nice church. It's a nice facility. But I remember us rolling tables out and setting them up, and boom, like that, we had a full Baptist potluck going, and we were sitting down eating, and we had good fellowship. I remember you and your family came over to the place y'all were putting us up at. It was a very nice place. Guy in the church had a real nice place to put us up, and we ate pizza and homemade cobbler and ice cream, and it was great. And we stayed up talking way too late. Our wives were ready to go to bed, and we could have kept talking, and it was great. You're like a lot of my other friends. You're just 2 hours away from me. It's 2.5 hours from my house to here. And I always say, if all my friends were close, I don't know if the world would be in a revival or we'd go into a recession, or I don't know what would happen.
Grow tired of each other, maybe.
We probably would. You
really believe that? I didn't know that.
Well, I thought it was funny when you went downstairs to get a cup of tea or something, and I was looking at your books, and you came in, and everybody gives the same disclaimer. Now, some of those I don't agree with. They're just on my shelf because they were given to me. I've heard that like 20 times this past month in pastor offices, and I make the same disclaimer all the time. I've got a bookstore. I even have to say there's stuff in here I don't know about.
Can't read them all.
I can't read them all. Shoot, I read it like a 8th grade level, man. What I can read, I don't understand half the time. So why don't we talk a little bit about the church here? How long have you been at Dayspring?
I came April 2nd of 2021. That was my first sermon here was Easter.
Wow. Yeah. You came right at the tail end of the COVID controversy.
Yes. Yeah, that's right. I think regulations in Arkansas, if there were any, I don't know if there were any in Arkansas, but in Kentucky, where we're originally from, they'd just lapsed, gone into, eased up in April of 2021.
Yeah. So. Yeah, I think the people of Arkansas had got their cup full. They spent I want to say it was like 6 weeks to flatten the curve, and at the end of 6 weeks, about everybody in Arkansas was done.
We're done. Yeah.
And we were not going to shut the church down during COVID. I was just determined we're not shutting it down. And then I started getting these phone calls from out of town saying, hey, what time's your church start? And I was like, huh? And they're like, our church closed. We're coming to Van Buren. We're going to church with you. And they were from Tulsa and Joplin. And I'm like, we're going to end up with 200 people in church. So I called them. I texted them back and said, hey, we're closing. And they were like, I cannot believe you. You're such a liberal compromiser. I had higher hopes for you. We didn't close. We just went to the barn. The whole church met at the house in the barn, and we just weren't gonna be the we weren't gonna be the super spreader with everybody coming in from out of town. Because I had people, I can think of a couple families in Oklahoma up near Tulsa. I could think of a couple families in southern Missouri. They'd listen online, on sermon audio. I had a couple families from Russellville, Harrison, places like that. They always wanted to go to our church, but like good church members, they're not going to miss their church on Sunday just to go bouncing around. Yeah. And as soon as they got a good excuse not to be in their church, I was like, we're going to have more people here than our church is going to hold, And So we just had what I call the John Bunyan services. We met in a barn. I had a big straw barn. Everybody brought their chairs. We printed off some song sheets, and I set up 2 square bales of straw, and that was my pulpit. And we had visitors. You know, my mother-in-law's church was closed. She lived across the street. One of the guys that worked on her farm, he came to church. He didn't normally go to church, but you know, why not? So it got so good. People were like,
do we have to go back?
Do we have to go back? That's what they were saying, Mike. They were like, do we have to go back? And I was like, yeah, because the gnats are fixing to come out. I mean,
oh, yeah.
Yeah, we're early
as soon
spring.
As the heat hits.
Yeah, when the heat hits and the gnats come out, y'all will all be ready to go back. So
air conditioning and flush toilets.
Yeah,
nice.
that's right. That's right. So anyways, but yeah, we met for 6 weeks, and I got called a liberal by everybody that thought I'd closed the church down, and I didn't. I just moved the meeting place from the building to the barn, and I will do that again if need be. Yep. And it was good times, man. It was good fellowship. It was good singing. Everything we would do on a Sunday in the church, we did on a Sunday in the barn. Yeah. And it was good. So tell me, how old is the church? This building looks brand new, every bit of it. This
building's built, I think it was finished in 2017, late 17, early 18. The church is probably 25 years old, somewhere around there.
So were they meeting in homes and rented spaces?
Yeah, rented spaces. I think the first time was like a storefront. They've met in a school storefront. Couple different locations over the years, and they bought this property and saved up the money, and when they built it, it was paid for. They wanted to make sure they could do it without the debt.
So this building's completely paid for?
Yeah, there's no debt.
Wow, that's wonderful, because you have great facilities.
Yeah.
You were talking about not having a fellowship hall, but you've got a wonderful sanctuary and wonderful meeting space. You've got you've got everything you need, and it's a great place. We love it. You know, a lot of people come here and say, "Man, we really like your building." It's not necessarily a typical looking church building, but it's still, to me, it's fairly typical. I mean, it's just not an old white building. It's a brown siding, but it's got stained concrete floors. That makes it nice, especially when you're rolling tables around for a fellowship hall. And we got quite a few kids in the church, so we make a lot of mess. Yeah, I think it's a great facility. And for those that don't know, Royal, Arkansas is where you're located at. That's just outside of Hot Springs.
Yep.
Next to beautiful Lake Ouachita. Mm-hmm. And this probably is one of the prettiest places in Arkansas. I mean, I live in the Ozarks. This is in the Ouachitas. Yeah. But I tell people all the time, if you want a pretty drive from Y-City to Mount Ida in the fall on Highway 270, it is just a beautiful valley through there. And Hot Springs, on the other hand, is a pretty place, but it's kind of a notoriously dark place. I mean, I don't know how familiar you are with history, and you probably don't want to run down the town that you're pastoring in, but for those that don't know, there's a national park in Hot Springs because it's Hot Springs National Park, and at one time it was thought that the Hot Springs had healing powers.
Yeah, there's still people that think that.
Yeah.
They'll come from all over.
Bottle up water and take it home and drink it.
Heal themselves, It's like the fountain of, what is that? The
fountain of youth.
Yeah.
I remember in school growing up in Arkansas, we studied the history of Arkansas, and one of the more popular things was Hot Springs. Babe Ruth came here.
Yep.
The great baseball player trying to heal some infirmities that will remain unlisted.
Yeah.
But he came here and soaked in the hot springs. Some of the
It might be where they started they had the minor leagues or the majors used to come here for spring training.
This was their spring training. Yep. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. And then it became a place of gambling, even though gambling wasn't legal in the state. Back in the 40s and 50s, it was notorious for brothels and houses of gambling. As a matter of fact, the local police department had been bought off. There's all kinds of documentaries on this. And so they had people stationed out on the highway between Little Rock and here. So the governor would send like a group of state police down here to raid it. and they would tip them off like, hey, there's state police coming down the highway. They would close these buildings down, empty them out, lock the doors. There'd be nothing here. And there was this big back and forth all in Hot Springs because of the gambling and the drinking. I mean, it was really a town that would have rivaled Las Vegas in its time.
I know there's some history with Capone here.
Yeah, there was some mob ties here. Well, you fast forward through all that. You have a racetrack here. That was the only horse racing, gambling casino now. So it kind of has that history, but it's still a beautiful town. It's a wonderful town. We got Lake Catherine, Lake Hamilton, Lake Ouachita, all three of those recreational lakes.
DeGray's not far away either.
I mean, it's a beautiful place to live.
When we were driving here, again, we're from Kentucky, the Knobs area. I mean, hills and hollers everywhere. And we're driving to Arkansas, and we're coming through the Delta, and my wife's like, no, I can't live in a place where I can see for miles. And I was like, well, I believe the hills will start soon. We made it to Little Rock, and there still wasn't any hills. But as soon as we got out of Little Rock, the hills started coming back. So.
I tell people, when you get west of Little Rock, Arkansas turns pretty.
Yeah.
Yeah, I tell people that all the time because I run into people all the time that live near Memphis, and they're like, yeah, Arkansas is ugly. I'm like, if you've never seen nothing but a rice levee.
That's right.
And they'll say, well, your rivers are all muddy. And I'm like, yeah, well, you need to come to this end. They're all clear. And
rice and cotton everywhere.
Yeah. Which last week and a little bit of the week before, I drove from West Oklahoma to South Dakota, from South Dakota to central Wisconsin. I saw more corn and cotton and soybeans and milo. I love farm country. But I was begging for some timber by the time we got to the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. I was like, oh, look, honey, trees. Look at this. There's trees. Because I had driven through the breadbasket of America, basically. And
we got plenty of trees here, too.
Yeah.
We grow them right here.
Yeah, this is a logging area.
Yep.
Yeah, when you're going down the highway, you see signs that log trucks turning. You're in log country. Why don't we talk about, you say you grew up in Kentucky. Let's talk about what you did before you came here. I know you served as a missionary, and I'm not real good with the UK, and I don't want to sign you to the wrong country. So why don't you tell us a little bit about how you got from Kentucky to the mission field?
All right.
Because, Mike, you bring a perspective having served churches outside of the lower 48. You bring a perspective that if all you've ever done serving the buckle of the Bible Belt, you have no idea. And I think that needs to be, I think you need to talk about that.
All right, yeah, I born and raised in Shepherdsville, Kentucky. That's about 25 miles south of Louisville, Kentucky, right off Interstate 65. It was a rural area when I was a kid, but, man, it's really grown up now with Amazon and all the other tilt slabs that were built in the area. But grew up in a small rural church, Bible-believing, kind of followed the doctrine of whatever was being taught at Southern Seminary at the time, as we were 25, 30 miles from Southern, so it would be Arminian, Calvinistic, back and forth. Most pastors were there 3 to 5 years, but I have a very good experience growing up in that church. And
so you had the rotation of guys that were getting their degree.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, 3 to 5 years. The longest tenured pastor was there when I was in my 30s, and he was there about 13 years. Good, faithful pastor. He was there about 13 years. Longest by far, most people 3 to 5. And it's kind of hard on our church. And then, not only was your pastor that way, that seminary students would come. And then, so your Sunday school teachers would be floating in and out. And so there's really no stability at times in the church, except for the old folks.
Yeah.
But, my spiritual grandparents, literally, very close.
Good.
Very close to those folks. Loved them dearly. My children grew up under them as well. They seemed old when I was a kid. I'm 50 now, and my kids got a chance to meet most of them, and
Right.
They still look the same. But anyway, I grew up in that church. That somewhere along the way, the church ended up having a kind of a loose association with some other church in Scotland, there in the UK. And I moved here. I told somebody I used to live in Scotland. They said, "Oh, really?" we never met anybody who moved from Scotland. They were talking about Scotland, Arkansas. I was like, no. I mean the country. But anyway, there was a pastor at the church in Scotland. It was Glen Rothes Baptist Church. He was from Kentucky originally. He had moved to Scotland, had been there about 10 years when I got there. I didn't know him, but actually he lived about 15 minutes from where I grew up. But he had been in the same association our church was in, and about 6 or 8 years prior to that, somehow or another, our church and their church had done something together.
Right.
And our church had gone over there on a trip. I wasn't in the church at that time. But just in God's providence, they were moving buildings. They'd outgrown their space, and they were seeking people to come over and help. And I did construction work for 25 years at that time, still doing it, and I still do it now. But anyway, I was doing construction work about 25 years, and they needed about a handful of people to come over there and help them remodel a building so they can move into it. And so 5 people from one church and 2 people from our church ended up going over there. I think I went over there I think it was April of 2017. I didn't really want to go. There was a guy in our church, again, another providential thing. Our church on a particular Wednesday night didn't have service because we canceled it because of Thanksgiving. And one of my daughters said, I want to go to church tonight, Dad. And I said, well, we're not having church. So we went to a sister church down the road, and the guy said, hey, we're putting together a mission trip to go to Scotland. Would you announce that in your church? And I said, yeah. So that Sunday morning, I announced this trip that the association was taking. And after the service, someone said, hey, I want to go on that trip. And I said, what trip? He said, the trip you announced, the one to Scotland. I said, oh, okay, yeah, you need to get in touch with so-and-so, and they'll help you. And he said, no, I want to go, but you need to go with me. And I was like, I had no desire whatsoever to go. But anyway, I ended up going with that gentleman and 5 guys from another church. And as soon as probably the second day I was there, I was thinking, this place is great.
Really?
The people at the church, the people in the country. And so, yeah,
How long did you stay on that construction mission trip? We
were there for, I want to say 8 days. Worked every day. The church, you hear this saying all the time, there's 90% of the work is done by 10% of the people, not this church. 90% of the work was done by 90% of the people. I've never seen a church serve like this. It was a bigger sized church, especially for the country of Scotland. It was a mega church for Scotland. It had about 200 members, which is unheard of there. Most churches about 20 to 30 right. folks. So I had 200 members, very, very gospel-centered, gospel in the prayer, gospel in the singing, gospel 2 or 3 times in the preaching of the word. And so all kinds of people were getting saved. And just a faithful, loving, serving church. Never experienced so many people serving and wanting to serve and looking for ways to serve. Yeah. Not looking for ways to get out of it, but looking for ways to serve. And so a very good experience. But we fell in love with the people. And I was like, man, I think I would like to come back here again. And so as soon as I got home, I started doing some research on the area, doing some research on the church, and doing some research even for real estate, which is kind of normal for me. If I was going somewhere, I was like, I wonder what it costs to live there. And my wife asked me what I was doing, and I told her, and she's like, okay. And I said, what do you think about going to Scotland for a short term, just me, you, and the family? And she said, oh, okay, let's pray about it and see what happens. And so we did, and I reached out to them, and I guess probably maybe a couple weeks later, they got back with me and said, yeah, come on. What are you thinking? And I said, maybe just coming over there for 30 days or something, 90 days.
Right.
And they said, yeah. They flew me back out there. I did some more construction work while I was there, and every night I would meet with their elders, and we'd pray together and eat together and talk about what it would look like if our family came. And they said, okay. And we got a religious workers visa. I went out there with the intention of staying 90 days. The visa was for 2 years, and we ended up staying that full term. And then they asked me, I was kind of doing a pastoral internship. That's kind of what it turned into. I was a lay pastor, lay elder in the church I grew up in, and this is kind of a testing ground for me to see if ministry was something for me. I taught Sunday school in the church that I grew up in, but I'd never preached before. Never taught outside that Sunday school other than discipling other folks. And so we went to Scotland.
So you didn't go over there as a preacher. You went over there is just a guy that knows how to do construction work.
That's how it started. Yeah.
And you're going to go over there and just do whatever needs to be done in the church.
Yeah, and what they did when they ended up setting up basically a job for me, because in the UK you got to have all kinds of parameters to meet. You got to dot your I's and cross your T's, or the government won't allow anything. And so I would do construction work about 25% of the time, and my daughter sometimes would help me as well. And then I would I love my dad. Was a deacon in the church that I grew up in back when the deacon family ministry plan was hot and heavy.
Yeah.
And so he had about 10 families. And so I grew up going with him as a kid as he would visit folks. And so I fell in love with older folks, listening to their stories, just whatever. So when I got over there, 25% of the work I did was construction. 25% of the work I did was visiting the older folks, the shut-ins, things like that. And 50% of the work I did was kind of witnessing in the area, witnessing to unbelievers, meeting with other guys in the coffee shops to disciple guys that are already in the church. So that's kind of what they tailored our position as. It wasn't a paid thing,
right?
But the church supported us as far as providing us with a home to live in, paying for our utilities, and we just took care of our other needs.
Wow.
But yeah, so we was over there for 2 years, and then the church, and I said, well, it's time to go home. And they said, well, would you consider staying? And I was like, well, yeah, we would, because we loved it. I mean, the weather's great. It's it's usually 100 degrees. We're having Indian fall right now in Arkansas, but usually it's 100 degrees here, and the high there in the summertime is about 70.
Oh wow!
So it's cool, crisp breeze in the morning, and so it's fantastic weather, fantastic people, and we thought we were there for the duration. We thought we were there for the rest of our lives. We'd already bought a home there at the end of at the beginning of our second term. And so the church brought us on, made a position for me, became an elder in the church, one of the pastors on staff. I can't remember what the title was.
Were you doing some of the preaching too occasionally?
No, I would preach so this church was, like I said, a pretty faithful church. They would help other churches, smaller churches that were 20, 30, 40, 50 folks, if they found themselves without a pastor. Like some of
so
the
they were sending you out.
So I'd probably preach. The first time I ever preached was actually there in Scotland. I preached in Dayspring Baptist Church, which is right off of right outside of Edinburgh, and that was probably in 2020. The first time I preached in a church. I taught some on Sunday nights, but I wouldn't consider that preaching. So yeah.
So they just used you kind of as a.
I had
discipler.
opportunities, but I kind of ran from them. Yeah.
Yeah.
So they would say, "Hey, Mike, do you want to preach Sunday morning?" And I'd go, "No."
Yeah.
And they say, "Okay." And I was there. That's part of the reason I was there, but I was kind of fighting it. I don't like being in front of people. I'd rather just kind of skirt in the room, skirt around the walls, and make my way in. And I didn't have a problem meeting with people one-on-one or in small groups. I didn't want to be standing up on a platform or anything like that. It's uncomfortable. And so every opportunity I had, I pretty much turned down, except when they were the smaller churches. I'd be like, I probably need to do this.
Yeah.
And so I would go and serve in those smaller churches.
So how long did you end up staying in Scotland?
We were there just a little bit over 3 years. Then the COVID pandemic hit, and in Scotland's mentality would probably be like Seattle, Washington, Chicago, Illinois, New York City, LA. It shut down. It was actually against the law to be outside of your home more than an hour a day. It was against the law to be in somebody else's home. It was against the law to have somebody else in your home. It was against the law for your kids to play outside.
What?
Yeah, it was insane. And that went on.
So you just couldn't go outside. They wanted everybody stuck in their own home.
Yeah, you could go to the grocery. You could go to the doctor. You could help somebody get groceries. You could help somebody get to the doctor. And if you had what they considered an essential job, you could do those jobs. But everything else shut down. I mean, we didn't have the church gathering for 11 months.
Good night.
And I was like, I think the Lord's calling me back to the States. Yeah, so it was pretty tough. At first, we were weathering. I was like, man, this can't go on forever.
Yeah.
And they'd watch, 24-hour news cycle of the COVID stuff, and people would get on there, and they would every week the prime minister would talk. You had prime minister in Scotland, a prime minister in the UK as well, and so it's just chaotic for me. I said, this is just insane.
How did you? And this is something just personal for me. I've always wanted to know. I saw a little plaque over here behind me that says there's a 1,776% chance you will not take my guns from me, or something along those lines. I know you're pro gun guy. I'm a pro gun guy. Yeah. I never leave home without it. It's kind of like
Simon the Zealot.
What was it like traveling around with no gun ever?
You know, I always had a gun on me for 15 years. It didn't matter if I was in a federal building. My children were born in the hospital. I had a gun on. If I went to a military base, I had a gun on.
Yeah.
People said, "What are you worried about that?" I was like, "Someone has to take my rights. I'm not going to give them up."
Yeah.
And so I just wore it, and I wore it so long it was never I was never consciously feeling, so I'm not giving away any cues. I just wore a gun for 10, 12 years. But yeah, you get to Scotland, and there's farmers have them for hunting and for fending off, other animals from their their sheep, but stuff like that. But yeah, you can't have a gun. The police don't wear guns. And, almost all the Brits would ask, what's the love affair with guns? And I could never find an answer that suited them until a while, because people would even ask me, how are you supporting yourself over here? And I said, well, I sold about 8 AR-15s and 20,000 rounds of ammo. And they go, what is wrong with you? I was like, I don't know. I mean, that's what the Lord used to support my family for 2 years while we're here. But finally I figured out what was the way that they could understand. And I said, Scotland has been oppressed by England for years. I said, you know how you all hate, and they hated the English.
Yeah.
I said, you know how you all hate the English? Well, you all gave up your guns and they took you over. We hated them too, and we didn't give up our guns, and we kept our freedom.
And we
won our
it.
freedom. They understood then.
Yeah.
They understood then. I said, we didn't give up our guns, and we kept our freedom. Or we earned our freedom that way.
Yeah.
So they're like, okay, I can understand now. But it's still kind of weird that people can just have guns going down the street.
But if everybody's got them, we're nice.
That's right. That's right.
There was a guy driving down here. He got upset. I don't know who he was upset with, me or the guy in front of him, but he zipped around me and got up behind the car in front of me, and he was waving his finger out the window. And I don't know. My wife's like, what in the world? I said, I don't know. What did we do? I said, I don't think we did anything. And she goes, I think he's mad at the car in front of him. And I was like, I don't know. And so the car in front of them, they're kind of having words. And I'm like, everybody's tough until we get out and go face to face. Right. You can wave at each other with one finger if you want to, but you're in the South, and these things can go from you're mad to you're dead just like that if things keep, So that was pretty much the extent of it. They both kind of calmed down, and we rode the rest of the way down Highway 71 peacefully. And
praise the Lord.
Yeah, and it's because everybody has access to them.
Yeah.
And where you get into trouble is in places where not everybody has access to them. I heard there was a Catholic school shooting here just recently. I don't know
heard about that this morning.
I don't know any of the details. I just saw a headline.
Minnesota.
Is that where is that?
St. Paul, Minnesota.
Yeah, and I thought, well, okay, that's got like the strictest gun laws in the world, and all these things are illegal there. You can't have a gun in school, so anywhere you take them away, you make the people vulnerable. And my wife is always like, we ought to go overseas, and I'm like, no, I don't like walking around without it on me. I don't.
Yeah.
I mean, if the Lord told me to go, I'd go. If he told me to walk across the desert, I'll walk across the desert. But it would be so awkward because, I get up, I put my wallet in my back pocket, my keys in my front pocket, my gun in my pocket. It's my everyday routine.
Yeah. I got out of that routine by being in Scotland. My kids, they couldn't believe it. My son especially is like, Dad, he's like, you need to go get your gun on. I'm like, half the time I don't wear it unless my family's with me. If it's just me, I don't care anymore.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
Just get out of the habit. That's how it is.
So you've pastored here for 4 years now, a little over 4.
Yep, that's my first pastorate. So
yeah, first pastorate. Come off the mission field and take your first pastorate. Wow.
I'd never even been a preacher
and
before.
For people that don't know, how old are you?
I'm 50.
You're 50, same age as me.
Yeah, I'll be 51 in September. Yeah,
I think we've talked about that.
Yeah.
So you didn't really get into the ministry, so to speak, as far as on this level till
I was 43 or 44 before I ever preached a sermon.
Yeah. Which your years weren't wasted.
No.
I mean, like you said, you taught Sunday school. You had a good basis. I've known you well enough and talked to you enough over the phone and in person. It ain't like you got saved and called to preach and you're out, trying to learn your way through and making a bunch of dumb decisions. I didn't start preaching until I was 30 or 31. Yeah. But those years from 18 to 31, what is that, a 13-year span? Yeah. I'd been in the military. I had worked some jobs. I'd been supervisor level. I'd been over some people. Had my own job, worked for myself. Yeah. I learned a lot about life. And I'd always been in church. I grew up in church. And so having that kind of knowledge, just general biblical knowledge, going into the ministry as an adult was not as big a transition as coming out of Bible college at 22 and like you're going to go out and tackle the world and, all you've ever done sack groceries at the grocery store. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so I had enough life experience that entering into the ministry really was just, I had to learn to preach. That was about it. And preaching came easy to me. So the Lord knows what he's doing. Whenever he puts us in, whenever he takes us out, he equips and supplies. So you've served in a church, elder level. You've done some preaching. You're well acquainted with churches in Scotland. You grew up in America. You know what it's like to sit in a typical Southern church and hear, typical. What's the biggest differences between here and there church-wise?
Again, the church we were a member of, and so I've been a member of 3 different churches in my lifetime. The church I grew up in, the church we served at in Scotland, and the church that I'm pastoring now here. So, and my experience there was mainly, in Scotland, was mainly at that one church, and I probably preached in maybe 4 other churches. And so those churches are pretty similar to what we would find in maybe rural America, small congregations, typically older folks, typically looking for what do we need to do to reach
the young people.
Yeah, and so kind of that mentality, and so I didn't have a whole lot of interaction with them other than sometimes I would go out and eat lunch with somebody in those churches. But our church that I was part of in Scotland was Glenrothes Baptist there, like I said, about 30 minutes north of Edinburgh. It was multi-generational, 17 different ethnicities in that one church. Yeah, there's a lot of European immigrants there because you're in Western Europe there if you're in Scotland, or it used to be. Now it's no longer part of the UK or part of the EU, but yeah, so it was a very diverse church. We had people that have been on social programs in our church there in Glenrothes all their life. So they're, almost, they call them schemes. We would call them projects, where their parents didn't work and their grandparents didn't work and they were taken care of by the government.
They'd been in the system their whole life.
And then you had people in our church that were doctors, and you had people in our church that were
so
were
it was
pilots.
A very diversified.
Yes, very much so.
What do you credit that to? Just a gospel focus?
Yeah, for the gospel. So again, they preached expositionally. They were a typical Southern Baptist type church, broad evangelical. They were complementarian. And so, again, the gospel, you could, if you had ears to hear and you were paying attention, you would hear the gospel in its entirety or in partiality at least 5 or 6 times every service.
Wow.
This is every Sunday morning. Then they gather Sunday nights and other nights during the week as well. And so they would even break up in smaller groups. And they're just very, very active church. They're very active in witnessing to folks in the community. And so that.
How did they do that witnessing? Just organically meeting people?
They're in the UK, drinking coffee or drinking tea is a really big thing. Everybody does. I mean, it's hard to even grasp. I understand now after being there why we threw the tea in the harbor in Boston. We don't want your hot tea no more. We don't want nothing to do with you. We're going to make it cold tea now. That is a huge cultural thing to not drink hot tea. I mean, everybody does. They drink coffee as well. So people would get together, 5 or 6 times every day, and it'd be tea break. It's tea time. I mean, we got to stop what we're doing. Everybody's stopping what they're doing. They're drinking tea, and
So they were just very social, and in those socials, they were talking about the things of Christ.
Yeah, before church, you would have tea time at the church. After church, there'd be tea time, and people would stay.
So that would be kind of your fellowships at church. Would it be around a teapot?
Very much so. Nobody was. There were a handful of people that would get there late, and right before the church started, and a handful of people that leave when church emptied. Most people wanted the fellowship, and so it was a very, very close knit body. Again, 80-90% of the people serving, and Sunday mornings would be much bigger, of course, than on the Sunday night. But there would still be 70 or 80 folks coming on a Sunday night.
Yeah,
also great folks. I love them dearly. Still in contact with many of them.
Wow. Well, then let's talk about the culture, because everything I hear is Europe is so hard. The UK is so hard to plant churches. They're so averse to Christianity. Did you find that to be the case? I mean, obviously they don't have near as many churches as we do.
Yeah.
But I mean, what do you say to that? People that say, they're hardened to it. I mean, you haven't been gone 4 or 5 years.
Yeah. Yeah. So the area we were in, I can kind of speak to that. And, we were in a town, Glen Roth, this town of about 50,000. The town had about 13 neighborhoods in it. It's hard to explain how neighborhoods, each neighborhood had its own bank, had its own grocery stores, had its own primary schools.
So it was like a town within a town.
Yeah, towns within a town. And a lot of times people wouldn't, this is a town in size-wise smaller than Hot Springs as far as geographically. A few more people than Hot Springs, like about 50,000. Hot Springs is, about 40,000. But Hot Springs spreads out. But Glen Roth is very close. And you could literally leave one little community and be in the next community by just simply crossing a more of a major street. But they were set up that way so kids wouldn't have to cross major roads. They just had to cross little small streets so they wouldn't get hit, because everybody's walking there. But culturally, people love to talk with you. They love to hang out. We talk about hospitality here. We have no concept of hospitality in America. If you've ever been to foreign countries, I've been to about 5 of them, and Americans are the worst when it comes to hospitality. There are people that have they are good at it, but in comparison to other places, unbelievers have better hospitality in foreign countries than Christians in America do. But Scotland, everybody would invite you in. So, I would go regularly every week, sometimes a couple times a week, but every week, and knock on people's doors. And as soon as I started talking,
just cold knocking.
Yeah, just cold knocking. Yeah, I mean, especially.
So the Mormons haven't run that over there?
No. And a lot of people.
Oh, that's right. They don't have guns. You could do that.
Mormons are there though, and so are the Jehovah's Witnesses. Interestingly enough, but I'd knock on the door and just asking if there was any way in which the church could serve, and of course, I don't sound like those folks. So they said, "Why are you here?" And I said, "I'm glad you asked. I'm here to tell you about Jesus." And so I would just start telling them, about why we were there and what we were doing, and they would say, "Do you really believe such and such?" So you're telling me, and I'd be like, "No, the Bible says." And so then I would always go back to that, and they're like, "Really?" And so I would just always point them, kind of that Billy Graham thing.
Yeah,
this isn't me speaking. I don't have any authority, but this is what the Bible says.
Right.
And just kind of go with that. And sometimes people would invite me into the house. They want to talk about it. I've been inside of many people's houses where they were, no men in the house or no women in the house, or just kids, or whether might be a lesbian couple, or might be homosexual couples, or it might just be people shacked up together. They use that term partner in the Broadway. A man and a woman could be a partner; they just aren't married.
Yeah.
And so it could be a man and a man and partner, a woman and woman and partner. And so we minister to all kinds of different folks there, and most of the time people would allow me to come into their homes and speak with them.
What was the church's stance on alcohol over there?
So the older folks, the church itself.
You don't have to talk about an official position, but what is the people?
It really wasn't official, but there were people in there that would drink. The culture there is much more open to drinking than, especially here in the South.
Sure.
But it was pretty split. Probably the older folks weren't really into the drinking. They would call themselves teetotalers, and then the younger folks they would
still go.
Yeah, but they weren't. We didn't really have a drunkenness problem. In our church.
No. That's not what I'm talking about.
But
well, I just know the public houses. The pubs are such
they're everywhere. They're
everywhere. It's such a.
And you can drink. I think you can drink at 16 there on your own legally. You can go into a restaurant, but if your parents are there, there's really not an age limit. They can order a beer for you or whatever.
Right. Yeah, that's
just acceptable there.
Yeah, it's just normal practice of life.
Yep.
And wow.
No, we loved it. We loved it there. You know, people say, going to other places is difficult in sharing the gospel. It was never harder in Scotland than it is here. This is a much harder place to share the gospel with folks than it is, for at least for me, than it was in the UK.
Just because the people aren't as open to discussion?
I think so. And then again, you have this cultural Christianity here. We're probably about 40 years behind the UK. So most folks over there, Jesus is a curse word. A lot of folks didn't grow up in church.
Yeah.
Maybe their grandmother grew up in church. Their parents probably didn't even grow up in church, but maybe their grandparents. And so church wasn't a thing. And so if you started talking about, you could mention sin, they're like, oh we sin. Here in America, everybody's like, oh no, I'm good. Yeah. I'm good. At least here in the South. But,
so
but not there. They know. I was like, do you know what sin is? They go, oh yeah.
So you're saying in 40 or 50 years, it'll be better here?
No. I think it'll be easier to share the gospel here. It'll be easier. Because right now, it's kind of like going through the book of John, right? Everybody believes.
Yeah. I've always said you got to get them lost before you can get them saved.
That's the truth. That's the truth.
And that's what I keep running into when I try to share the gospel. Everybody's good. No, I'm good. Nah, they've all got they've
raised my hand, walked the aisle, been baptized,
they've
signed the
made
card.
peace with God in their own mind. And that's one of the wonderful things about the bookstore is the conversations I can have that I can't have any other way.
Yep.
And it's still yet, I have a lot of people that come in that look around and they're like, oh, these are all Christian books. And I mean, they shoot out the back door. I mean, they just
like they're going to catch something.
Yeah. Like, my pastor Russell, he came by the bookstore today and I was tying up some loose ends because I've been out of town for 11 days. I'm trying to get some deposits and things made and get my rent paid and everything before I head out of town again. And Russell comes by, my pastor, and he's talking to me. And this guy comes in because I turn the open sign off. I'm there and I'm not in a, private conversation or meeting with a bunch of pastors. I open the bookstore up if I'm around. So I turn on the lights and open the bookstore up and this guy comes in and what was funny was Russell made the statement like he kept his hands in his pockets and didn't touch anything. When he walked in and kind of started looking around, he said he just put his hands in his pockets and started like, okay. And I start talking to the guy, like, where are you from? You live around here? No, I'm from St. Louis. And he's looking around and I'm trying to, stir up a conversation and I can tell he's uncomfortable. He does not like being in there. He shoots out that door and Russell goes, you notice he kept his hands in his pockets and he wouldn't touch nothing? And I said, you can just spot him. I would love to be in a community where people didn't feel that way being around Christians. But the sad thing is, you mentioned cultural Christianity. There's so many fake, phony Christians running around that most people never encounter a real one.
Yeah.
And I listen to...
That's true.
Well, if you just take all the people that say they're Christians, which is probably that guy that was waving at me in the car and the car in front of him. And
that's why we got a bad name.
Yeah, that's why we got a bad name, because that's how Christians act. And they're hypocrites, And so... I see what you're saying. If you're in an area where you don't see Christians every day and people don't profess to be Christians all the time, and it's not culturally expected that you just start out a Christian in life, it would be easier to have those conversations, because in the bookstore, I have better conversations with, like you said, lesbians that come in and they're not mad at God.
Yeah.
And they can just come in and just start talking. And you know what? For a Christian, you sure are a nice guy. And I'm like,
never met a Christian like you.
That's what they say.
I've had that happen before too.
And I'm like, well, I'm sorry that you've met bad Christians.
How come you're not judging me?
Yeah. Shouldn't you be yelling at me and telling me I'm going to hell? And I'm like, well, yelling the facts at you or just talking about your situation, two different things.
Yeah.
And so what you say kind of makes me want to go to Scotland, but if we have another COVID pandemic, I'd go psycho. I couldn't handle that.
The church that we were part of there in the UK, there in Scotland, because of the facility it ended up moving into, it started its own little cafe in town, and they were outwardly and openly, it was called the Bridge Cafe. And the whole point is to bridge, and the town was called the town of Fife. They actually called it the kingdom of Fife. And so it was trying to bridge the kingdom of God with the kingdom of this world, this fallen world.
Wow.
And so, they would openly hire evangelistic Christians. And then the church would volunteer in this cafe, and there would be scripture on the wall, and there'd be Christian music playing. And the whole point is to try to provide the best service of any little cafe in town, and have gospel conversations.
Yes.
So they'd had to have all kinds of people in there because they didn't want the service to be terrible.
Yep.
But they wanted people to be able to talk. So if someone was serving on someone and someone started asking questions about what's all this scripture on the walls mean? What does that mean? And so someone else would pick up the slack because you don't want the tables. You don't want people to go, I went there, but the service was horrible. No. And so, but I never met with folks in that cafe unless it was somebody in the church asked me to. There was a few guys I was discipling, and I would meet them in a cafe in the poor end of town where the church was trying to establish a church plant.
Right.
And we would sit there. So if I was discipling someone like a Christian, I would do that in the cafe that's in, the unbelieving part of town, so to speak. And people would, is that a Bible that you have? I haven't seen one of those open in years. And so, so they got to know me. And I just made sure I was always in the community. Every Thursday I would go to their little coffee shop, and then other days during the week. And if I was going to prayer walk with folks, I would take them there. If there's somebody wanted to talk to me about something in our church, I would take them there, and we walk around the community. And so people were always seeing me and bumping into me.
Right.
And so I about made good inroads by the time we left. But that's God's sovereign and all that. And so the church, the whole point of the church was trying to establish at some point, God, if God wills it, to plant another church in the area, because where the church is now, they can't really grow much more unless they start another service, and they don't really.
Yeah, when you said 200, I was like, good night. That's a giant church.
It is. That was the members, and then there was always 20 to 50 folks just visiting that would come through, and there are all kinds of visitors. And we would do they had outreach in the church. There's a ministry or a book called Christianity Explored, and it would kind of go through the Gospel of Mark. And we'd have all kinds of folks that when we would witness to them, we would ask if they would like to explore the Bible, explore Christianity, and they would be like, well, what is that like? And we kind of explain, it takes about 8 or 10 weeks, and we'll just do it in somebody's living room, or we can do it in your living room, or we can do it at a coffee shop. And so we did that with all kinds of folks, and you'd have homosexuals, you'd have lesbians, you'd have, all kinds of folks that would be willing to do it. And then at the end of it, you're like, well, what do you think? Is this the Christ, the Son of the living God? Mm. And, some of them would, we would see them wrestle with having to count the cost. Do I really want to give up my partner for Christ? And most of them would say no, but you just never know what God does in the future.
That's awesome.
Grass withers, the flower fades.
Yeah.
And so the same thing with the word never returns void. And so you just pray that happens. And while you're doing those, you're ministering those. Everybody knows what nights you're meeting with them, and you're giving names to people in the church. And there are older folks and other folks that aren't involved in that ministry because they don't feel comfortable. And they would be praying for you. They'd be praying for those folks that you're ministering to. And the Lord had saved many people in that. Wow. So you'd have people, most of my most of my growing up, the people that be baptized would be the kids, right? Yeah. The kids are getting saved. We're not actually growing the church by evangelism. Yeah. It's by having
it's vacation
children.
Bible school and church camp. That's your.
Right. So we were there, and you'd see baptized 30-year-olds, 40-year-olds, 50-year-olds, and 70-year-olds, and you're like, man, this is awesome. Yeah, it's kind of neat to see. So it was a great.
Was it hard to leave there?
Yes, it was. Yeah, and you wrestle with, am I in God's will leaving? If God didn't want me to go, He wouldn't have, I've read the book of Jonah.
Yeah.
I couldn't have left. And, I kind of got sidetracked there too. Part of the main reason I went was to dabble in preaching, to see if full-time ministry was for me. And I kind of ran from that. I just started getting into it there toward the end, right there toward when COVID hit. And so it kind of sidetracked all that. And so kind of coming back to the States kind of put that back to the forefront.
Oh. Well, being back in the States, now that you've been over there and you've seen all these people getting baptized, do you feel like you're trying to plow on hard ground here now?
Oh yeah, it's definitely different.
I mean, do you feel? I know that I understand what you're saying about it. You were there, you were having these great gospel conversations, you were door knocking. I mean, if you went down, what is it, 226 or 266? If you went down there and started knocking doors, people wouldn't even answer if they were home.
You see the blinds move. That's about it.
That's about it. Don't answer.
What are you selling?
They look like Jehovah's Witness. Don't answer.
Right.
You come back here, you're pastoring your first church. Are you wanting to we need to go get a coffee shop in downtown Hot Springs? I mean, it's got to be a change of gears for you, Mike.
It is because, just because something worked in one place doesn't mean it'll work in another. And, the culture there is different. Like I said, I grew up in Kentucky, and the culture there is drastically different than here.
Yeah.
Everybody here is on slow time.
Yeah.
I mean, literally, in Kentucky, everybody's 15 to 30 minutes early. Here, it doesn't operate that way. And so for me, that's been a huge transition as well. But it's different. I understand. My mentors always said, people always wonder why I'm not doing a whole lot of, why he wasn't doing a whole lot of evangelistic outreach. He said, I'm still trying to get you people saved. I believe.
I've got a mission field right here.
Everybody believes. No, I get it. We don't know, do we?
No, we don't.
Sometimes you look at folks, you think there's no way that one's saved, but they are. And sometimes you look at that one and say, oh, they're saved, and they're not.
Yeah.
We don't know. The Lord knows. So we just got to keep preaching the word.
The time will reveal it.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Those who persevere to the end.
Yeah.
Those who bear fruit.
So the ministry here at Dayspring, you said you're still doing construction work. Obviously, you're working and pastoring.
And building my house.
And building your house. Yeah, and I know you want your house built. How's that coming, anyways?
It's doing well. It's coming along. You go to another country, and you don't have a really income. No tax returns for 3.5 years. You come back to the States, think I'm just going to hop right back on the horse and go. No, banks go, what do you mean you don't have any income for the past 3 years? And so it took until last year before a bank would even touch us on giving us a house, and we had no debt. It didn't make any difference. They were like, you don't really make that much money. Pastors, you can just hide all kinds of money, right? Housing allowance and all that stuff. So it looks like the church pays us in wafer, communion crackers. But we do all right.
Yeah.
So it'd be nice because I think I want to be with the people more. So we want to use our home as that. It'd be easier because we've kind of been in transition. It seems like since 2018 we moved from Kentucky to Scotland, and then we lived in 3 different homes in Scotland just out of necessity because of people were letting us borrow a place until they found a more permanent location. And so we were kind of moving back and forth then. And since we've been in Arkansas, we've lived in three different places.
Yeah. Did your kids, were they homeschooled or did they go?
They're homeschooled. They've been homeschooled since
while in Scotland they were homeschooled.
Yeah.
See, I didn't know how that worked over there.
Yeah, you can do that there as well. Especially being a foreigner, they don't have a problem with it. There are people in Scotland that do homeschool, but it's extremely rare. Extremely rare. And they're usually not homeschooling for the same reasons we would in America. America, it's politics or religion.
Yeah.
There, just a lot of times it's just practicality. A lot of times it's health reasons.
Yeah.
But there are Christians that homeschool there, and it's actually kind of growing a little bit there. But no, we homeschool, so I made it easy.
Yeah.
Made it easy. All kinds of history you can teach your kids when you're there. We visited about 45 castles.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
We don't understand history in America, especially in the South. I remember going, I think when I was 21, we went to Maine, and Maine is an original colony
Yep.
and one of the earlier colonies. So we would drive past these houses that would have built 1681, and I'm like, what? And this house is 400 years old.
Yeah.
And we went to this old farm called Northland's Farm, and it's where the guy that started Pillsbury Flour and the first governor of Maine and like these big influential people all grew out of this family, and their home was like 350 years old, and they built another home on the back and then a barn on the back because it gets so cold. The barns are attached to the homes, and I was like, now this is real history. And our family come over. We had some family that live in France, and they were like, no, you're measuring things in centuries. We're measuring them in millennia. And I'm like, well, what? And they're like, oh, yeah, there's a castle in our town that dates back to the 1300s. I'm like, wow. It's a whole different atmosphere.
It is. We lived about 10 minutes from Markench, which is the original Scottish capital in the 9th century. And in that little community, and it's small. I mean, I don't know, a couple hundred people live there now, but there is a tower that was built in the 9th century that's still the Normans built, and it was still standing, still looked great.
Stacked stone.
Yeah, we don't have nothing like that.
Yeah.
We all kinds of buildings built in the 1300s, 1400s, 1500s.
Yeah, and our houses are falling in 50 years after we build them.
The house we lived in for about 6 months, it had Welsh slate on the roof, and it was 120 years old. Still original roof, no leaks.
Wow.
So we're doing good to get 20 years out of shingles.
Yeah, no kidding. No kidding.
But, they don't have severe storms like we do here in the Midwest. So there's no...
But you're not going to blow slate off a roof anyways.
No.
If you do, you got bigger problems than just a few pieces loose.
That's right.
I've watched some TV shows where they renovate houses in the UK, and they talk about that. I mean, they're turning an old barn into a home or a horse stable into a retreat or something. And I would look at some of the timbers that they had, built and put pegs in, and I was like, man, the dude that built that thing was. I mean, he's been dead 400 years, and it's still there.
That's right.
And we just don't build things that way in America. We don't use stone. We don't use timbers. We use everything's just disposable.
Yeah, quick and easy.
Yeah, and having just driven through the Midwest in the last month, I saw so many old barns. I would say old barns that probably ain't 100 years old. Yeah. And they would be kind of getting dilapidated, and I'm like, man, you better fix that tin. If you don't fix that tin, it's gonna your boards are gonna get wet. They're gonna rot, and the whole thing's gonna fall down. But in America, we're too busy to fix the tin. We've got too many other things. It'll last another 10 years, and that's all we need.
Yep.
And they just
worry about it.
Yeah, they don't think that way over there.
No, the house we lived in there at the end, it's probably 60 years old, but. The outside of it is a material called rough casting, and that's basically our equivalent to drive it, but not soft. It's like aggregate.
Really?
Rough casting. And then the wall behind that is a brick. And then the interior wall is plaster on top of the brick. And that's all the interior walls. And then the roof would be slate, or it'd be a ceramic type roof. Or even like what looks like terracotta. Yeah. So just stuff built to last.
What's a church service look like where you went in Scotland? Was it very structured out, big long bulletin with about 30 line items of things that had to be accomplished?
No, our church, we didn't have bulletins. We had the screens, and the stuff would, announcements would be on the screen. We'd still make announcements. They called them, what do they call them? I can't remember what they called them. It was a weird word. They use some different words there, right? I've understood the ESV and the NASB much better since going on. Like, this is why the ESV wording is backwards. These people start with a phrase I would end with.
What version of the scriptures did y'all use over there primarily?
They use the ESV.
ESV?
See, I was raised on the NASB, and so I just never could. It just always seemed backwards every time I read the ESV. But once I got over there, I was like, this makes sense. This is the way they talk.
See, I picked up an ESV here just not too long ago, and I was like, this reads a whole lot like the King James reads. It's a structure is the same way, which in my mind, the way I preach, the King James fits me well because I tend to exegete things and break them down, and exegetical type, it helps me understand. I don't speak King James every day, but the way it's written helps me see my points and my thoughts. And people say, I don't know how you can read that. And I'm like, I'm used to it.
Yeah, that's how, yeah.
Yeah.
But no, church service is pretty typical. You know, we had opened with a call, call to worship, just like we would in a typical Southern Baptist church. They're very, very similar to that. You know, the pastor, again, I don't know what the church looked like before he got there, but it was an American that was the pastor. There were other elders there that, were Scottish.
Yeah.
And so I can't say.
But it wasn't a big liturgical thing with a bunch of.
No, so, just typical call to worship, a couple songs, and then maybe a scripture reading, a couple more songs, and then the preaching of the word, and then maybe a couple more songs. Yeah. That service would last about an hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes there in Scotland. People weren't in a big a rush.
And like you said, they were coming for the fellowship. They were staying for the fellowship.
Yeah, and they did fellowship. These people would do. That's not the only time they were having fellowship.
How did they handle a shutdown like COVID? I mean, being such a...
They're conditioned to be submissive.
They don't have the 1776 spirit,
Not at all. Not at all. It's been beat out of them, generations ago. And, there were laws during the COVID breakdown. And then there was what is called, I'm trying to think of the word they used. Kind of like recommendations. I can't remember if that's the right word. There were things that you had to follow, and then there was things that they recommended you follow. But we had a guy in the church that was high up in the health care system there, and we had a guy in our church that was a lawyer. And so they became on my speed dial, and I would say, hey, can I do this? And they say, yes, you can. And I'd say, can I do that? And they go, no, you can't. And I'd say, where's the line? And they would explain it to me, and I would skirt just inside that line, and people in the church were not comfortable with it. Some of them weren't, the older folks especially, because they thought I was playing fast and loose with their health. But that wasn't the case, because I was doing a lot of outreach in the sense, taking care of the older folks. So a lot of these folks were afraid to go shopping, so I would go shopping for them.
You were trying to help.
And there was a guy in another church who was a pastor at that first church I preached at, Dayspring Baptist, and he ended up getting sick during COVID, not from COVID, but he had a weird blood disease that affected his kidneys, and he had to have dialysis. And I would take him to dialysis twice a week. And some people kind of thought that was going a little too far to drive him.
Wow.
And I'm sitting there thinking, he can't get there otherwise. And but again, it wasn't, they weren't trying to, in a sense, I don't think, necessarily be legalistic, because they weren't a legalistic church. They were just frightened. This is a culture been through 2 wars. This is a culture has been through the plague, and they thought that was going to happen. And the first time we met as elders about that, I probably was insensitive. I said, we need to buy some wheelbarrows.
Yeah.
And I was.
We hear about the plague in the distance in school. That
culture lived it, and so they were frightened. And I was probably a little insensitive.
And we were raised on Patrick Henry. Give me liberty or give me death.
That's right. So
they never had those speeches. Yeah.
And so I was trying to use those guys I wasn't breaking the laws, but I was right up to the edge.
You were doing all you could.
All I could to get out of the house every opportunity I could.
Wow.
But no, the folks weren't mad at me. They were just concerned. Some of the other pastors would get a phone call. Hey, did you know Mike? I saw Mike out doing this.
Mike's actually got a suntan, and we're all clammed inside.
No, but I love those people. Even the ones that would call, they were just calling out of concern. They were worried about their own health, and they were older. But I have no ill feelings to those folks. They're fantastic. Yeah. I still got pictures of them all around my office behind me.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was the old folks that when they found out we were leaving, they were kind of devastated. Because I would take my daughters with me, and they would sing to them, and I would.
And how many kids do you have?
We have 4 children, 3 still in the home.
So I start saying, I know you have 3 at home.
Our oldest is 27. Our youngest will be 15 in October. Yeah. So 3 girls and a boy
and Henry. Yeah.
Yeah, Henry's the youngest.
I remember just when you and I met, and kind of hit it off. And I think you called me one time. We talked about something. I don't remember. And I was like, man, I really like Mike. And I was trying to get you to come up for some pastor lunches and stuff, but you were always working, or the kids had homeschool things. And it's
the
hard.
difficulties of bivocational.
Yeah. And you're 2.5 hours away too. Yeah. It ain't like you can just drop in and go back to work like a lot of bivocational pastors do. But I just always, wanted to have a little more time together. And I remember us sitting around the house over there by the lake that night, and we just enjoyed your whole family, your daughters and Henry, and we just had the best time sitting
They're
around and
typical
talking.
antisocial homeschool kids. They don't know how to talk to adults.
Yeah, right.
That's sarcasm.
Yeah,
They're
that
used to
is.
talk. That's all. They talk to adults.
Yeah. Well, Henry works
love
with
it.
you a
Yeah,
lot.
yeah.
He travels around. I mean, I said, Henry, you doing anything worthwhile? Just working. He's got me
He's
working
on work
a lot.
release. That's what we call it. If his mom, sometimes I'll say, Mom, he's not going to be doing school today because Dad needs him. Put your work boots on, boy.
Yeah. He'd ask me about guns and stuff, and he's all the time. I remember him watching. I had some stupid stuff on my YouTube channel, and I remember him watching that. And you and I was sitting over talking. He had a phone. He was over giggling. I was like, "What are you doing?" He goes, "I'm watching you shoot sauerkraut with a full auto BB gun." And I was like,
"That's right up his alley."
Yeah, that's the kind of dumb stuff kids like. And that I used to have a YouTube channel where I did a lot of dumb stuff like that. But we just enjoyed being with you and your family. And I, honest to goodness, don't know anybody close to you other than Greg Coleman.
Yeah.
And
that's a good brother.
I've tried to get you in touch with guys like that. And Greg, I know you and Greg have met a few times and fellowshipped. And if I was closer, man, I would be doing the same. But it's just not on my way to anywhere.
That's right.
I don't.
Yeah, there's no expressways here. We have a bypass. That's it. We're an hour from an expressway.
Yeah. But I mean, you have a wonderful church.
Yeah.
You have good people. Y'all have good doctrine. I mean, a lot of times when a pastor goes to a church, sometimes he's teaching bad people how to be nice people. Sometimes he's teaching, biblically illiterate people what the Bible says, and or he's teaching them, how a church functions. I don't sense any of that. It seems to me like you're just, I mean, not that churches don't have problems and don't have things, you don't have issues you need to work out. It's just, you seem to be I'm just pastoring them and preaching, pastoring and preaching.
Plodding
along. And that's a good way to see it. And
I'm going to do the same thing this week I did last week. Same thing I did a month ago. And
yeah. And I can tell just from being
for the word to work,
watching you interact with your people, the way you talk to them, the way you interact with them. When I've been around you and you've talked to them, some pastors only see their people on Sunday. I can tell that's not the case with you. You're interacting with those people throughout the week if you're able, and it shows. Even when I talk to them, and they're like, "Yeah, last week Mike and I blah 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 blah," and last week Mike and I, and somebody else was like, "Well, a couple weeks ago, he and the kids came over and yada yada yada," and I'm like, "Oh, okay."
Well, they're our family. Our closest relatives are 10 hours away. Blood relatives. So this is literally, become our family.
That's the way it should be.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm singing your praises.
It's
because
the household
not all
of God.
But not all preachers do that.
Yeah.
They may have family 10 hours away, but I've been told by pastors, don't be friends with any of them. You keep your distance.
Well, so they don't find out we're sinners.
No, because
they know.
The first church they pastored, they got hurt.
Yeah.
And they don't want to open up to anybody.
I think that's the benefits of coming into this later. My kids have grown up in church. We served. We were we're the folks that we served.
Y'all showed up when the doors were open.
Yeah. I drug, my kids had a drug problem, right? I drug them to church Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, and when we went to serve, they served with us. They served with us in Scotland. They served with us here, and I mean they're part of the ministry. It's a family. My family is a family of serving together. Yeah. We don't get to do everything together, but we love to, and we include them in everything that's all right to include them in. Everything that's appropriate.
It's good to see healthy pastors with healthy families, because you don't always see that in every church. You don't see that in every family, and I was talking just the other day. Well, I was talking with Steve Schultz. He'll be the podcast that would go up right before this one. And Steve and
I've met him somewhere.
You probably met him at our conference, because he's from Kentucky. I don't know if you would have ever met him. Right. That's probably why
I didn't meet him in Kentucky, but I remember him because of that. That's right.
Y'all would have had the same state in common. So Steve and I were talking. He wrote a book on church, kind of how to establish and maintain a church. It's how to find a pastor, some bylaws, some constitution. And he talks pretty extensively about the book he wrote. But we were talking about the qualifications of a pastor in 1 Timothy chapter 3, Titus chapter 1. And in talking about that, it's real easy for churches looking for a pastor just to kind of gloss over that. It's like, well, that'd be nice, like a wish list.
Yeah.
It's not.
Good luck.
Yeah. Those don't exist. No, they do.
I'll just take that one down.
And some guys excel at one characteristic, and other guys just maybe barely meet the minimum. But those
I might be barely meeting the minimum on both ends.
You have a good family. I've been around your family. I've met your wife. I've met your kids. You have a good relationship. Having that basis, having that there, it means a lot, because when your family doesn't model anything in the New Testament, it's just a show that they're all putting on Sunday. The world sees that. The church sees that. It's just obvious.
Yeah, the family is the training ground and the proving ground.
Yeah, that's a good way of saying it.
It is. I mean, that's what part of the reason I'm qualified.
Yeah,
I wouldn't be qualified if and it doesn't mean you're perfect by any means. My kids know more about my sin.
Yeah, but your daughters
anybody.
will sit down with their mother and my wife, and they'll sit around a table and they'll talk like four adults.
Yeah.
You wouldn't say, well, Missy and Jeannie are sitting over there talking to a couple of little girls. No, they're not. They're just like,
yeah. So it's a blessing that, and again, it's I grew up in that church, Cedar Road Baptist Church, very thankful, and the pastor that I mentioned that had the longest tenure there, 13 years, he modeled family worship. And, he did it in his house. He modeled how to love his wife. And, when he walked into the room and she was already in the room, he was looking for her as soon as he entered the room, and he wanted to make eye contact with her. He's discipling me and he's not even aware of it.
Yeah.
I'm paying attention to him. And as soon as he makes eye contact with her and she makes eye contact with him, he can go about his business. And so he would model those kind of things, and I would notice them. And then I can't remember if it was a Wednesday night, he rolled the tables we had a fellowship hall there, but he rolled the tables into the sanctuary. We moved all the chairs. They're like these padded. They're not pews, you can roll them out. And he put tables in there, and he said, I just want to show you all a few different ways y'all could do family worship around your table. And I was like, I think I'm going to try that. And so I started doing that. I'd read biographies to the kids. I'd read short scriptures. I went through J.C. Ryle's Expository Thoughts on the Gospel. It's a seven volume series where he's just explaining the gospel. We did this for, 10 or 12 years, and we were sitting there talking about it. I never had any intention to even serve as any position in the church, just serve, because I was doing construction work. I was making good money, and I was helping to support folks, and I was like, man, this is great. I'll just do this.
Yeah.
This is what I want to do. And teach my children. And my wife looked at me one day and said, you're going to be a pastor one day. I thought, you know how stupid that is?
Your wife said that.
Yeah. And I was like, that's the funniest thing I've ever heard. But, And it still, I didn't believe it for a while, but then, eventually you I guess you're shepherding and pastoring your own children, and that was my training ground.
Yeah. So
I did. Sometimes they're the best and worst disciples, because they're the best and worst of me at the same time.
I remember I decided my kids were not going to ride the school bus to school, which my wife taught elementary school, and the elementary school they went to was near our home. So, my wife, they would ride to work with the school with my wife every day and ride home every day. So, they could ride a school bus from the high school or the junior high or wherever to her school, which would be relatively quick. But I was going to take them to school every day when they got out of elementary school. So 6th grade on, I drove my kids to school, and every day in the car, discussions, talking, open conversation. We would listen to the intro of this guy's. He had like a morning. I hate to even tell you who it was. Maybe I will off the air and will let everybody else wonder. But he had a song that they played in the intro, and I would turn it on. Right, it was always right about the time we were leaving. And if the radio wasn't on, I would turn it on just so we could all sing the intro together. And my kids would. It was half mocking him and half kind of like enjoying it.
Yeah.
And to this day, my kids will they can sing the entire song word for word. And
fun times with Dad.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we also had a rule where we were all going to sit at the table and eat together.
Amen.
Amen. You're not going to get a plate and go to your room.
No phones allowed at the table.
Yeah. Well,
still
I don't even think our kids really had phones back then. They're 27 and 24. Yeah. We didn't get them phones till they were
I'm talking about
high school.
No phone from me or my wife.
Yeah, right. But the thing about it is we sat down at the table and ate together. And that kind of, I'm not against, like you said, reading expository thoughts on the gospel from J.C. Rock. That's wonderful. Having the conversations, being so available and normal with your kids that they can say, Dad, there was a lady at school today who said yada, yada, yada. And I said yada, yada, yada. And she said yada, yada, yada. How would you have, said that? And I look at the average American home, and it's just exactly what you see on TV. It's Dad is just some buffoon. Mom is, in her own little world, trying to survive being married to the buffoon. Both of them are idiots. The kids are the smartest people in the show. And, they're doing whatever they want, and they're living their life, and the parents are just there to fund it.
It's like 5 or 6 or 8 roommates.
Yeah.
Not a family.
Not a family. And another thing I see is that mom and dad are so absorbed in the 2 kids that when the 2 kids or 3 kids or however many you have, they all get out of the house, mom and dad don't know how to live together.
Yeah.
Well, everything they've ever done, it just went out the door. And if they can't go to the ball field every weekend and sit and watch them play Little League ball, well, what are we going to do with our lives? It is just such a foreign thing to have a biblical family that I think that's important for a pastor. And I'm telling you, when you're in a pastor's home, you can see it. When you're around a pastor's kids, you can see it. And I've been in a bunch of pastor homes doing what I'm doing. A lot of them have grown children.
Yeah.
Most of the people that I know, most of the pastors that I'm associated with, you can tell they've got a family just like family you have. That spills over into the church. Just like you said, your spiritual mentor, he was discipling you, and he didn't have a discipleship book out.
No, he didn't know it. I'm just watching him.
And I think that's what real discipleship is. I don't think it was Jesus saying, all right, 12, let's gather up.
Right.
It's disciple time.
Yeah.
I think they just observed Jesus being Jesus.
Yeah. Walking day by day.
Yeah, and I think when we live in our congregations and our congregations observe us for who we are, they see how we interact with our wife, they see how we interact with our children, that all of that is a discipling time, and it's done in a way that, it just happens.
Yeah, we're a small little church, and we try to keep it simple. And this is nothing new. It's borrowed from someone else. We just sing the word, preach the word, pray the word, and by the grace of God, try to live the word every day.
Yeah,
and pray for help.
Yeah,
and ask for forgiveness when we fail.
Yeah, right. I was talking to a pastor on the way down here, and he was asking kind of, I don't mind saying this will be out after he's preaching. It was Wes Brown. Brother Wes pastors over there at Plummerville First.
Got a deep voice and a full-on beard.
Yeah. If you're a pastor and you want to covet he looks like a Civil War general from the South. I went to the Museum of the American Civil War, and there was this picture of this dead Southern general, and he had black hair, a big old black beard, and it was like his death picture. He was propped up there, and I took a picture, and I said, "Oh no, they got Wes," and it looked legit, like, "Oh no, they got Wes," but I forgot where I was going. Oh yeah. So he said, "Hey, I'm preaching at like a pastor's meeting in a pastor friend of ours church here in a couple of weeks," and he was kind of running his some of his thoughts by me, and I was like, "Yeah, that's all good stuff, and I forgot where I was going with all that, but I don't remember what we were talking about. Got off on the Civil War and
home.
The home,
the kids, and discipleship, and
discipleship.
Not necessarily. It doesn't have to necessarily. Not formal.
Yeah,
it's more of life on life, watching someone live.
And that's what we were talking about. And he was saying, pastors just need to be pastors and just do the basics. We don't have to have some gimmick, some trick. What he was talking about, if you want to look this up, it's probably found at Pleasant Valley Baptist Church in Greers Ferry, Arkansas. It'll be posted. It was probably preached somewhere the first part of September. This won't go out until November. So here's what he said. He said he was making the application. He said when Daniel went to Babylon and they were trying to give him all the meat and the protein and all the food they would eat, and he wanted to keep his Jewish diet.
Choice food.
Yeah. He said, let me just eat the vegetables and let's see what God does with me. If I start starving, then, hey, our God's not real. Wes and I were having this conversation. He said, pastors, it's not that, that was a diet that, we all got to get back on the Daniel plan. That's not it. Rick Warren, he came out with a Daniel plan diet. We just eat vegetables to lose weight.
Okay.
He got tired of eating vegetables. Last time I saw Rick Warren, he is as big as me or bigger. But what Wes was saying, and I'm crediting Wes because he was right. He said, look, Pastor, you ought to just say, no, church. We don't need all these fancy foods. We don't need this big luxurious table. Let's just preach, pray, sing, and eat together.
Amen.
Those 4 basic things are expected of every congregation: to preach, study the word, pray the word, preach the word, everything we do with the Bible, pray together, share our prayer requests, pray for one another, sing together corporately, and then eat together, fellowship in every way we can. If we do those 4 things, let's just see if God grows the church. Let's just see if God sustains the church. Let's just see if we grow godly families out of this idea. Let's just see if that's enough. And it is. And it's supernaturally enough. Yeah. And so as he and I was driving down here, and now we're talking about it, I always remember this thing Paul Washer said, and I'm not a big Paul Washer fan. I don't know if I've heard him preach in person once. He preached 2 hours. I think that's the only Paul Washer sermon I've ever heard. It was great. It was 2 hours. I was like, was that 2 hours? That was wonderful. But I saw him interviewing him one time somebody shared a clip of Paul Washer on church growth. And this stuck out to me. And this is what he said. He said, if you can explain your church's growth, it's not God growing your church. And I was like, yeah, he's right. If we would say, it was this thing that we started doing, then that's what's growing your church.
Yeah.
Like Wes said, some people, they grow their church by just declaring war on something. Then everybody else that's at war with that something goes and joins their church, and it's the church of war. Or, you know, they've got some pet doctrine. Everybody that's on that pet doctrine, they all go to that church. And that's how they're growing. And Wes is right. Whatever it is that's your defining trait, that's what's defining your church. If it's the word being preached, the word being sung, the word being prayed, the word being, shared in fellowship, if it's all that, then
It's kind of hard to go wrong.
It's kind of hard to go wrong.
That's right. Yeah, that's one reason, I preach through books. Otherwise, I'd be hobby horsing if I wasn't careful.
Yeah. I do series.
Yeah, I'm in a series now, but we finished the book of John.
But I can't do books and be itinerant like I've been for the last 14 months, I guess. But God's given me this series, and I keep getting more. I haven't preached all the sermons in it yet. I preached a new one last Sunday. It's called The Tale of Twos. And since I'm a Baptist, I alliterate it.
That's right.
Are you a alliterating preacher?
No, I do sometimes if it's obvious to me, but it has to be,
But you wouldn't walk away from an alliteration if it found you.
No, I wouldn't. No, it'd have to find me because I normally don't.
I went to Adrian Rogers Advanced Academy of American Alliteration.
I got it. Yeah, I'm picking up what you're putting down.
But I got this series called The Tale of Twos. And I take these contrasting things that are all throughout the Bible. Yep. They start with S, or mine do. It's my series. You go get your own. If you want to, you start them with Z. I don't care. But you'll run out of Zulu and Zorro and all of
It's kind of hard to figure out.
So there's two sacrifices in Genesis 4. There's two streets, the broad and the narrow. There's two siblings, one prodigal stayed home, one prodigal went away. There's two servers, Mary and Martha. One's serving Christ, the other one's serving everybody. I start going through all these. There's two searches, those that were bidden to the feast and those that were in the highways and the hedges and the lanes and the streets, the overlooked. And I just keep coming back to them and I can't quit preaching these, and I've got like 12 or 14, and every time I'm like, all right, you've preached all them, and then I preach Sunday on the tale of two showers, the rain that falls on the just and the rain that falls on the unjust.
Okay.
And how you handle raining on somebody else's field, the unrighteous field. How do you like it when the movie star gets out scot-free with murder? God causes rain to fall on the unjust. And if he can be kind and gracious and forgiving and merciful, well, shouldn't we? I mean, I'm like,
no, that's a great message. That's one's sorely needed in the church today. The church today is ancient Israel. We and I'm just talking about church in general. I'm not talking about my church or your church or just. It's American Christianity, not biblical Christianity.
Right.
And so there's so much hate.
Yeah.
Hating people. So much politics in it.
Yeah.
Let's just stick to the Bible and try to love like
we're
Jesus
a divided country, and that leads to a divided church.
Amen. It does.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, and I'm as bad as anybody. Like I said, I'm originally a Simon the Zealot, so I have to constantly be praying that the Lord would soften my heart to my enemies because I've got plenty of them. Anybody that doesn't line up with where I am, so Lord help me.
Yeah.
But I was an enemy as well.
Well, I have found this to be true. Travel and preaching in multiple pulpits has really softened my stance on things when I pastored the same church for over a decade. You do the same thing for 10 plus years. I did the same place in the same pulpit for 14 years. I held the same Bible conference for 11 years. I got in a routine. Yeah. This is the way it is. This is how it's done. This is, we're going to do it this way. This works. And you just you get in this routine and this rhythm. Well, I go into a church that's in trouble. I serve as their pastor. I pour my life into them for a year or two. I mean, I give them all I got. The Lord's been gracious. Every church I've done that with, God has just worked, changed lives, changed hearts, changed minds. Those churches are all doing great today, have great pastors. God's blessing them beyond measure, and that's wonderful. But then I get out of that, and I'm preaching. I preached in northern Michigan last Sunday, and I was nervous about it. And the pastor said, I heard you podcast with Richard Kleiner. You was a little nervous about coming up here, you know. And I'm like, well, I just don't know how well people up north would relate to a hillbilly like me. I mean, they don't call me the Backwoods Baptist for nothing.
I think there's rednecks everywhere, though.
Yeah.
I mean that in a good way.
But it went over well in northern Michigan. You know, they were like, man, that was great. You ought to come back sometime. I was like, well, okay. I'm in Texarkana Saturday. That's down there. In Texarkana, it's a different group. But here's what I've learned. I'm not nearly as dogmatic about all the little things. I got dogmatic about sitting in the same pulpit, preaching to the same crowd, getting the same amen Sunday after Sunday. I've been stretched more. I've been humbled.
Praise the Lord.
I've been humbled in these little churches that need help. I mean, you walk out of a church preaching to 80 every Sunday, and they love you, and they would go to war for you, and you go to a church that runs 8. Or you go to a church, you go preach in a church that runs 300 or 400, and you're like, man, isn't it nice to have all these happy, smiley faces looking back at you? And the next Sunday you're preaching to 10 old ladies, and I don't think half of them want to be there. That's good. Yeah. That kind of change and shift. And look, the way they do church in northern Michigan and the way they do church in Nashville, Arkansas with Bruce, where I'll be Sunday, is different. And there's things that we probably wouldn't be okay with down here that they're okay with in South Dakota. Yeah. And I don't want to be the guy that exports Western Arkansas Christianity to there, you know. If it's biblical, I want to do it. If the Bible mandates it, we will do it. Yeah. If it's not biblical mandated, okay.
Yeah, I'm not as dogmatic as I used to be about, you know, everybody goes through those, that extra, that second conversion. You get pretty annoying. Yeah,
somebody gives you a book and they're going, yeah, this book right here. And I've just about quit reading. Yeah. I don't read any doctrinal books.
You know, sad enough, you know, the Reformed camp's a pretty broad camp, but I think it's probably one of the most hostile.
Yeah, I don't want nothing to do with them.
Yeah, you know, it's just...
It's hard to say that because I got friends in it.
Yeah. Well, it can be the most hostile. And I'm not thinking about anybody in specific, but I mean, other than say the Josh Bice deal. You know, you see that he wasn't concerned about unity. It was all about division, and you're not going to find anybody that's going to dot the I's and cross the T's with what you. I mean, we all go, well, I agree with this guy except for on this, or we all do that.
Sure.
But he was trying to do that to an extreme, and it spilled over. And I think it's still a whole.
But I don't think he's an isolated candidate. I think there's a bunch of them in there.
I agree.
I think they.
And it seems to be in that smaller, the smaller group that.
But when you take doctrinal precision to be your defining trait, then you're going to find that there's a whole bunch of people that aren't as precise as you. And I think that's one of the things God steered me away from. He's allowed me to be in a broad spectrum Baptist. I tell people I'm the most ecumenical Baptist that anybody knows. And people will tell me that. Like, how do you get in with this group and that group and this? And I'm like, I don't know. I guess probably because I don't beat them up for being not exactly like me. And in a church, you ought to have some things that like, hey, this is what Dayspring believes. This is what Dayspring's going to do. I don't care what Gospel Light Baptist, some other campus. I don't care what they do. They can do whatever they want. They're their own Baptist church. Right. But I could be friends with them.
Yeah.
I don't wish them ill will.
No.
I'm not going to get online and tell everybody what's wrong with that church down the road. And I think you just see that in Reformed circles.
Now you see some of that, if you think about big names, you got folks like, Piper and MacArthur and Sproul, they partner together and they are not at all in the same camps, especially when you talk about Sproul and MacArthur or Sproul and Piper, but yet they were able to get along. But today it seems like folks don't even try to. Yeah. Even in their own small circles, because they're like, well, these guys just ain't got it figured out like we do. Or maybe that's not actually exactly how they feel, but sometimes it seems that way.
Yeah, there's guys that I'm friends with that I wouldn't have them preach in my church, but I could be friends with them. Yeah. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I wouldn't trust them with my pulpit. There's guys that
they bring in something that might be too controversial.
Some guys just looking for an opportunity to get up and lambast everybody. Yeah. And some guys have a history of doing that. They're gonna go. It's like if it's not controversial, they don't want to preach it.
Yeah, if you're going to somebody else's church and you're going to preach and you're going to take a message that's going to be controversial, a message that's going to be hard, and you take it to you're immature. Yeah, you're not a mature Christian. Yeah. You need to know where you're preaching and stick to something that's safe.
And it's hard to recommend somebody like that because they're going to burn your friends. Yeah, and but that doesn't mean that I'm not friends with them. Right, I mean. Right. If I pulled out of here and they had a flat tire, I'd be the one pulled over behind them, jacking up the car. I don't dislike them. Yeah. I just have to know where I, this is going to be a problem. And being a guy that travels around and preaches in a lot of pulpits, I would never intentionally say anything that would be contrary to what that pastor would believe. Right. Amen. So if he's more fundamental, if he's King James only, I wouldn't say anything about the ESV or the NASB or any other. I mean, and I preach from the King James, but I wouldn't intentionally say something that would contradict.
That cause him trouble.
Yeah. Whereas I know guys that are like, well, if they ask me to preach, I'm like, well, don't do that. You're just going to get up. You're causing division in a church. And
I don't think people take it serious enough when they think about that, the trouble that you can cause. Yeah, as much as the Lord hates division. Yeah, sound doctrine is important, absolutely, but in speaking the truth is important. But people forget the in love part.
Yeah, I'm preaching tomorrow on being filled with the Spirit. There's another guy preaching on being baptized in the Spirit. There's going to be anywhere from 5 to a dozen churches represented. There's a good chance I'm going to say something somebody don't agree with. But I was told what to preach on.
There you go.
I wouldn't go in and intentionally pick something in a broad group of Baptist preachers that I know would tick some of them off or cause them to. I wouldn't do that. But if they say, hey, we want you to preach on, okay. Yeah. So you ask for it, you get it. Man, we're pushing an hour and 45 minutes.
Oh, wow. Time flies, don't it?
Yeah. Wasn't that bad, was it? Mm-mm. Anything that we didn't get said that you wanted to say?
Jesus Christ is King.
Jesus Christ is King.
He's Lord and Savior.
Yeah.
And
He's the reason we do it.
Amen.
Yeah, God we do, good. And we don't do it because we have to. We do it because we want to.
Yeah, we might be weary in the work, but not of it, the work.
Bingo. Yeah. If you're still listening, you'd probably fit right at home down here in the Ouachitas. You're a backwoods Baptist too. We'll see you somewhere in the backwoods.